I've been a traveling salesman for most of my adult life. I sell industrial equipment to manufacturing plants across the Midwest, which means I spend about 3 weeks out of every month on the road. After nearly 25 years of this lifestyle, I've stayed in hundreds of motels and hotels, some nice, most forgettable, and a few downright disgusting. But there's only one that still haunts me, only one I wake up thinking about in the middle of the night, even 6 years later. I'm not a superstitious man. I deal in facts and figures, specifications and sales quotas. I've never believed in ghosts or monsters or any of that nonsense. But what happened to me at the Pinewood Motel off Highway 37 can't be explained by anything rational I can think of. It was late October 2019, and I was on the last leg of a particularly grueling 2-week trip through rural Illinois and Indiana. I'd had a rough day. My 2 p.m. meeting had been canceled after I'd already driven an hour out of my way to get there, and then my GPS had directed me down a series of increasingly narrow country roads that added another hour to my journey. By the time I hit Highway 37, it was already past 9 p.m., and I was exhausted. The rain didn't help matters. It had started as a light drizzle earlier in the day, but by nightfall, it had developed into a proper storm, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I was planning to push through to Indianapolis, where I had a reservation at a Holiday Inn, but after nearly running off the road when a deer darted in front of my car, I decided it wasn't worth the risk. That's when I saw the sign for the Pinewood Motel, illuminated briefly in my headlights before disappearing behind me. I hadn't noticed any town nearby, just miles of dense forest on either side of the highway, but a motel meant civilization of some sort. I carefully turned around at the next opportunity and backtracked until I found the narrow gravel driveway marked by the weathered wooden sign. The motel itself was set back from the highway, barely visible through the trees in the curtain of rain. It was a single-story building with maybe 15 rooms, arranged in an L shape around a small parking lot. The office was in the center, marked by a flickering neon vacancy sign that cast an eerie red glow over the rain-slicked pavement. There were only 2 other cars in the lot, an old pickup truck and a sedan that looked like it had been there for a while, based on the layer of dust visible even in the dim light and rain. I parked near the office and made a dash for the door, getting soaked in the few seconds it took me to cross the short distance. A bell jingled as I entered the small office. It was warm inside, almost uncomfortably so, and smelled strongly of cigarettes despite the no smoking sign prominently displayed on the counter. There was no one at the desk, but I could hear a television playing somewhere in the back. It sounded like an old Western movie, with exaggerated gunshot sounds and dramatic music. I rang the bell on the counter and waited. After a minute with no response, I rang it again, louder this time. The television sound abruptly cut off, and I heard shuffling footsteps approaching. The man who emerged from the back room was tall and gaunt, with thinning gray hair and deeply sunken eyes that gave him a skull-like appearance. He was probably in his 70s, wearing a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with veins. "Need a room?" he asked in a gravelly voice, not bothering with any greeting. "Yes, please," I replied. "Just for tonight." He nodded slowly and reached under the counter, producing an actual physical registration card and a pen, something I hadn't seen in years, as most places had switched to computerized systems long ago. "45 cash," he said. "No credit cards, machines broken." It was overpriced for what was clearly a dated establishment, but I was too tired to argue or look elsewhere. I filled out the card with my information and handed over 2 20s and a 5 from my wallet. He took the money without counting it and turned to a pegboard behind him where several keys hung on hooks. He selected one, room 8, and placed it on the counter between us. "Checkouts at 11, he said. "Ice machines broken. Vending machines at the end by room 1. No refunds." As I took the key, his cold fingers brushed against mine, and I had to suppress a shudder. There was something off about him that I couldn't quite place. Maybe the way he never seemed to blink, or how he moved with an unnatural stillness between actions. "Thanks," I said, eager to get to my room and away from his unsettling presence. "Is there a restaurant nearby?" I haven't had dinner. Nothing open this time of night, he replied. Nearest place is 20 miles back the way you came. I nodded, resigned to a dinner of whatever snacks I could find in the vending machine, and headed back out into the rain. Room 8 was about halfway down the row, and I hurried to it, key in hand. The room was exactly what I expected from the outside appearance of the motel, dated but functional. The carpet was a faded brown pattern that might have been fashionable in the 70s, and the bedspread matched both color and age. There was a small TV that looked at least 20 years old, a wobbly-looking table with a single chair, and a bathroom that was clean enough but featured mint green fixtures that belonged in a museum. I set my overnight bag on the bed, checked my phone. No signal, of course. The motel likely didn't have Wi-Fi either, but I was too tired to go back to the office and ask. I decided to check out the vending machine, hoping to find something substantial enough to pass for dinner. As I stepped outside, I noticed that the rain had finally stopped, and an unnatural silence had settled over the motel. There was no sound of traffic from the highway, no insects, not even the dripping of water from the eaves, just absolute silence that seemed to press against my ears. The vending machine, when I found it, was as outdated as everything else, with mechanical buttons rather than a digital interface. The selection was sparse, mostly candy bars and chips, nothing that resembled a proper meal. I settled for a couple of Snickers bars and a bag of Doritos, feeding dollar bills into the machine that it reluctantly accepted after several attempts. As I was returning to my room, I glanced at the other occupied rooms, wondering about my fellow guests. Room 1, near the vending machine, had its curtains tightly drawn, but a sliver of light showed at the edge. As I watched, a shadow passed across that sliver of light, someone moving around inside. The other occupied room appeared to be number 15, at the far end of the L shape, where the pickup truck was parked. As I looked in that direction, I noticed something strange, a figure standing motionless at the window, just visible between the partially open curtains. Even from a distance, I could tell they were staring directly at me. I quickly looked away and hurried back to my room, suddenly uneasy. Once inside, I double-checked that the door was locked and secured the flimsy chain lock as well. The room felt colder than it had before, despite the ancient heater rattling away under the window. I ate my makeshift dinner while flipping through the limited TV channels, mostly static, with only 3 showing actual programming, all with poor reception. I decided to call it a night around 11 p.m. The day's driving had worn me out, and I was looking forward to getting back on the road early the next morning. I took a quick shower in the bathroom with its questionable water pressure and went to bed, falling asleep almost immediately despite the unfamiliar surroundings. I woke suddenly, completely alert, though I didn't know why. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 3:17 a.m. in glowing red numbers. The room was pitch black. I had turned off all the lights before going to bed, but something felt wrong. I lay perfectly still, straining my ears to identify what had woken me. That's when I heard it, a soft scratching sound coming from the door. Not knocking, but a deliberate slow scraping, as if someone were dragging their fingernails across the wood in a pattern. It stopped for a few seconds, then started again, slightly louder. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound authoritative despite my fear. The scratching immediately stopped. There was a long pause, and then, just as I was beginning to think I had imagined it, a voice came from the other side of the door. "Excuse me," said a woman's voice, soft and slightly tremulous. "I'm so sorry to bother you at this hour, but I need help. My car broke down on the highway and my phone is dead. Could I use your phone to call for assistance?" Something about the woman's voice seemed off. It was almost too perfect, like someone reciting lines they had rehearsed. And there was an unusual quality to it, a hollowness that didn't sound quite natural. "The office should be able to help you," I replied, making no move to get up. "The manager can call someone." "I tried the office," the voice said. "No one answered. Please, it's cold out here, and I'm all alone. I just need to make a quick call." I glanced at my phone on the nightstand. Still no signal. I had checked before going to bed. "My phone doesn't have service here," I said. "You should try one of the other occupied rooms." There was a pause, and then the voice came again, but it had changed subtly. It was still recognizably female, but deeper now with an edge to it that raised the hair on the back of my neck. "I know you're alone in there, Michael," it said. "Why don't you open the door and let me in? It's not polite to leave a lady waiting in the cold." Ice shot through my veins. I had never told the motel clerk my first name. I had only written M. Thompson on the registration card. There was no way this woman, whoever she was, should know my name. "I'm calling the manager," I said loudly, hoping whoever was out there would be deterred by the threat, even though I had no way of actually contacting anyone. The voice changed again, dropping any pretense of femininity. It was harsh and guttural now, barely recognizable as human. "We've been waiting for you, Michael," it rasped. "For so long. Open the door. Open the door now." The scratching resumed, more insistent this time, accompanied by a low, inhuman growling. I scrambled out of bed and backed away from the door. The chain lock rattled violently, though the doorknob itself wasn't turning. Whatever was out there was putting pressure directly on the door, causing the frame to creak ominously. I grabbed my phone and the lamp from the nightstand, yanking its cord from the wall to use as a potential weapon. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold on to either item. I retreated to the bathroom, the only interior room without a window, and locked the flimsy door, knowing it wouldn't provide much protection if the main door gave way. The scratching at the outer door suddenly stopped. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart. Then came a new sound, soft footsteps moving away from my door, followed by knocking on what must have been the door of the adjacent room. "Hello," came that same female voice again, now sounding normal and distressed. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but my car broke down on the highway and my phone is dead. Could I use your phone to call for assistance?" My blood ran cold as I realized it was trying the same routine on another room, but as far as I knew, the rooms on either side of mine were unoccupied. So who was it talking to? I heard a door open, not the one to my room, but nearby. Then voices, a man's voice responding to the woman, though I couldn't make out the words. Their conversation continued for a minute, their voices rising and falling but never quite clear enough for me to understand. Then came a sound I'll never forget, a wet, tearing noise, followed by a gurgling scream that cut off abruptly. Heavy thuds, like something large falling repeatedly against the floor or walls. Then silence again, more complete than before. I stayed frozen in the bathroom, the lamp clutched in my sweating hands, for what felt like hours. Eventually, the gray light of dawn began to show around the edges of the bathroom door. Only then did I gather enough courage to emerge from my makeshift refuge. The room was exactly as I had left it. The door was still closed and locked, the chain still in place. There was no sign that anyone or anything had tried to force entry. I packed my few belongings with shaking hands, determined to leave as quickly as possible. When I finally worked up the nerve to open my door, the morning sunlight nearly blinded me. The motel parking lot was empty, not just of people but of vehicles as well. The pickup truck and the dusty sedan were gone. Even my own car was missing from where I had parked it the night before. Panicked, I ran to the office only to find it locked and dark. Through the window, I could see that the interior was empty. Not just unoccupied, but completely vacant. No furniture, no registration desk, nothing. Just dust and cobwebs, as if no one had been there for years. I stumbled back, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. That's when I noticed something else. The motel had more than 15 rooms. I counted at least 30 doors stretching around the building, disappearing around the back where I couldn't see. How had I not noticed that the night before? With growing dread, I walked back to where I thought room 8 should be, but the numbering system seemed to have changed. Where room 8 had been, there was now a door marked 17. I continued down the row, increasingly desperate, until I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. A door marked 3 stood slightly ajar. Dark stains marked the threshold and the concrete walkway in front of it, stains that looked horribly like dried blood. From inside came the buzzing of flies, loud in the morning stillness. I backed away, then turned and ran toward the highway, no longer caring about my car or my belongings. All I wanted was to get as far away from that place as possible. The highway, when I reached it, was deserted. I walked for nearly 2 hours before a trucker finally stopped and gave me a ride to the next town, a small place called Millfield. When I told the local police my story, they looked at me like I was crazy or drunk. According to them, there was no motel on that stretch of Highway 37, and there never had been. I insisted, giving them the exact location, even drawing a map. Finally, an older officer took pity on me and agreed to drive out there. What we found was the crumbling foundation of what might once have been a building, overgrown with weeds and small trees that had to be at least a decade old. There was no motel, no parking lot, nothing that matched what I had experienced just hours earlier. I filed a report about my missing car, which they found 3 days later in the parking lot of a truck stop nearly 50 miles away. How it got there, no one could explain. The police checked the highway department records and discovered that there had indeed been a Pinewood Motel at that location. But it had burned down in 1976, with several guests and the manager perishing in the fire. The land had been abandoned ever since. I've never driven on Highway 37 again. I changed my sales territory, even though it meant a pay cut. I couldn't risk finding that place again, or worse, having it find me. But sometimes, especially in October when the nights grow longer, I wake up at exactly 3:17 a.m. to the sound of scratching at my bedroom door and a woman's voice asking for help. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I catch a glimpse of a tall, gaunt man with deeply sunken eyes, watching me from a distance when I'm on the road. I've started staying at big chain hotels exclusively now, places with busy lobbies and electronic key cards and 24-hour staff, and I always double-check, that the number of rooms matches the size of the building, that the other guests are real people, and that I never, ever open my door in the middle of the night, no matter how convincing the voice on the other side might sound.